The iPad lineup has become really comprehensive in 2019, but the ideal iPad for most people out there is the one that sits right in the center of this pack. I'm talking about the new third generation iPad Air, which, when combined with new iPad OS, makes for a very interesting tablet indeed. We'll discuss about iPad OS later on, but first, let's focus on the new iPad Air. There's nothing particularly extraordinary about the iPad Air, but what makes it special is the fact that it combines Apple's capable and powerful hardware with a decent price tag. It's based on Apple's previous generation design philosophy, but I personally believe that it's a great thing because the bezels here really help with the grip. And then you also get a fingerprint scanner, which may not be as fast as the new Face ID, but it's much more practical nonetheless. Finally, you also have a headphone jack, which on a new Apple mobile device in 2019 makes it really precious. Up front, the 10.5-inch LCD display of the iPad is really bright and color accurate. The Air does not have the quad speaker setup like that on the Pro, but the single speaker here is really loud and clear. So, media viewing on the iPad Air is a really pleasant experience. If you've used any iPad in the past, then you know that these things are reputed for their phenomenal battery life, and the new iPad Air is no different. But the problem here is that it uses the Lightning port for charging and data transfer instead of the new USB Type-C on the iPad Pro. And Lightning port has its drawbacks, which we'll discuss later in the video. Powering the iPad Air is Apple's A12 Bionic chip, which is the last generation flagship chip. There's 3 GB of RAM on board. Basically, the specs here are similar to the iPhone XR. And I must say, the performance here is also similar to the iPhone XR, which is to say that it's excellent. The only time you're gonna miss the additional power of the A12X on the iPad Pro is when you do some really heavy-duty rendering. Otherwise, the A12 Bionic is powerful enough. You also have a Pogo pin connector on the iPad Air, which means that you can connect Apple's official smart keyboard with this one. The iPad Air also supports Apple Pencil, but the first generation one. Now, this brings us on to the iPad OS. First up, don't get confused. iPad OS is basically iOS 13 with a few more added useful features to make full use of iPad's big screen. So let's check out the most important new features of the new iPad OS. You can now have a lot more app icons on the home screen. You can also have your widgets here on the left if you want. An important change is that now Safari is full desktop class, which means that it will now load full desktop grade websites instead of their mobile versions. You can now also open multiple windows of Safari if you want. Sadly though, if you use Chrome like me, you won't get any of these features here. And talking of multitasking, you can have 2 windows like before, but with this iPad OS, you can also have multiple floating windows on top of them. Most importantly, the iPad now finally supports external pen drives and hard drives. This means that the native Files app is now also significantly improved with a lot more options, and managing your files is no longer a pain. However, the interface is still not as intuitive as that on a proper computer. Now let's focus on a very important question that many people out there ask. With the new iPad OS, can the iPad finally replace your computer? Well, I'd say not really. Allow me to explain. First up, the problem here is that the entry-level variant of the iPad, both on the iPad Air and even on the iPad Pro, is just 64 gigs. Certainly not enough to replace your laptop. So you definitely have to upgrade to the higher 256 GB variant if you wish to use this as your primary workstation. In the case of the iPad Air, that variant costs around Rs 59,000. Then is the fact that neither the keyboard nor the Apple Pencil come bundled with any of the iPads. You'll definitely need to get a dedicated physical keyboard if you want to get work done faster on an iPad. Now, Apple's official keyboard for the iPad Air costs Rs 12,000. Obviously, you can go for cheaper alternatives available in the market, but they don't connect to the iPad via a Pogo pin. So, the integration is not all that seamless. Then, if you are a creative professional, say an artist or a video editor, then you'll definitely need to spend an additional 8,000 rupees on the first generation Apple Pencil. As I said before, the Lightning port is a problem too. If you want to use the iPad as your primary workstation, you'll definitely need a dongle in order to connect external hard drives or pen drives to it. Now, Lightning port pen drives and hard drives and other accessories are harder to find and are much more expensive when compared to the USB-C accessories. In any case, you'll end up spending around Rs 70,000 all inclusive if you want to use the iPad as your main work device. And let me just remind you, for that price, you can get yourself a nice Windows laptop with an Intel Core i7 processor and also a dedicated graphics card. You also cannot overlook the fact that while technically yes, you can get a lot of things done on the iPad, but there's a big learning curve here. And even then, it's not as intuitive as that on a dedicated laptop. Finally, there is one problem with almost every Apple device out there, which is compatibility. So, if your primary phone is an iPhone, then transferring stuff onto the iPad is a breeze. But if your primary phone is an Android phone, then transferring files to the iPad can be a bit frustrating. Look, I really like the iPad OS, and I personally believe that this should be the standard version of iOS, even on iPhones. But I do believe that it's not yet ready to be your primary workstation and to replace your average laptop. The iPad still best serves as a supplementary device, which is best used for media consumption and to occasionally get work done when, say, you're traveling and you don't want to carry your heavy laptop with you. And the third generation iPad Air, with its powerful internals and a much more realistic price tag when compared to the ridiculously expensive iPad Pros, makes for the perfect iPad as of now. Okay, that's it for this video, guys. If anyone of you uses an iPad as your primary device, do share your experience with the community down below in the comment section. If you like the video, please subscribe to our channel for more content like this. I'll see you soon. Bye.